A couple of weeks ago in worship, I spoke about my first time doing ministry work. That first job in ministry, I was in college and I got hired to do a summer job where I would lead youth groups in service and ministry each week of that summer. That first summer I did this, I was placed in the small town of Boonville, Arkansas, northwest Arkansas, where the beautiful Ozark Mountains were. It was a beautiful place. I had great staff, and it was really a joy to be doing ministry. But there was one problem, and that problem was I had no idea what I was doing. My particular job that summer was to lead youth and work projects. It was leading them painting the whole exterior of homes, doing light construction projects, and working on yards. I believe very much in the work we were doing and the fact that for so many of these community members, this was the only way they were ever going to have their homes be helped out and cared for, as they couldn't afford any other way. And it was really a joy for me to get to plan it ahead of time, to go and visit the homeowners and hear their stories and what they needed and hear more of their past, and then to kind of share that to the youth. But I realized as these youth groups came that there was one big part of my calling and job that summer that I was lacking. And that was that I had no idea how to do any of this work. I had no idea going into that summer how to paint a whole exterior of a house. I didn't know how to mix paint at all. I didn't know that before painting the exterior you need to scrape off the previous. I didn't even know the right way of brushing the paint or washing the paintbrushes afterwards. It was all new. I had no idea, especially how to do light construction projects, like make steps or ramps or fix gates or fences. This was not my forte. They went over the basics of all these things for us in our week of training, and that was a huge, huge help. They also had a manual for us that was a little bit of help too. But my first week at the site, as I was mixing a 50-gallon huge plastic trash can full of paint and then having to pour that paint into 5-gallon buckets without hopefully spilling it all on the floor, which I came very, very close to multiple times, I started to realize that I very well may be out of my depth this summer. My gifts may not be quite enough to what all this job is. And along with that work projects, each week, each one of us 4 staff members were supposed to speak in front of the youth and adult leaders, sharing a little bit about our sense of call, or testimony, or devotion, or why we were here for the summer. And this was a time that I hated speaking out loud. If I could get away from public speaking in any way, I would do so. Some of you could probably relate to this. That going into any one of those speeches, my palms would start to sweat, I'd start to shake a little bit, and the first words would be very, very quiet coming out of my mouth, hoping that whatever I said would come out okay. And so those first few weeks, I'd wake up each day worrying that I would be found out, that the staff and youth and adult leaders would quickly realize that this Alex Krieger, who was there on site with them, is not meant for this job. I worried that I was letting down others and wondered what I really had to offer during this summer. Well, one week, midway into our summer, our area director named Jimmy, who had a number of sites that he oversaw, came and visited our site in Boonville to see how we were doing. It was a week that we were getting ready actually for a whole new batch of youth and had a lot of prep work to do in very, very long days. Well, one evening after a long, tiring day, we were sitting down for dinner, and after dinner, I offered to take people's plates and dishes back to the kitchen and wash them so that they could get some rest. And as I went to take them, before I could leave the room, Jimmy spoke up. And what he said to me changed the way I saw myself for the rest of the summer. Jimmy said, "Alex, you have a servant's heart. I've been watching you all week, and whenever any small task needs done, you are the first one to jump up for it. And believe me, that is such a gift here this summer." I wanted to say back to Jimmy, well, that's only because I don't know how to do the big things. I keep offering to do the small things. I wanted to say back to him, well, it's not really any big gift. I wanted to say, no, your praise is misguided. You shouldn't be saying these encouraging words to me. There's other people who deserve that more. I wanted to dismiss all of that encouragement. But then other staff members jumped in as well, and they repeated Jimmy's message to me. Here I was honestly feeling like I had been letting my staff down, the youth down, the adult leaders down, this whole town down all summer long. And instead, each one of my coworkers lifted up something that I was missing in myself, something that I couldn't see on my own. I did like serving others. I did like getting to know the youth and homeowners. I did like, even though I might not have the best gifts for painting or construction, I love serving by them and being an example and really encouraging them as they went through their days. But I didn't see those as gifts, not until they spoke up. For the rest of that summer, those words of Jimmy and my staff stood with me. They gave me more confidence and encouragement. They helped me do my job better, and they also gave me a good sense of peace around what I was doing. They let me know I didn't need to be an expert in this work. Many of the adult leaders and youth, they already had gifts for painting and construction and experience in this. They didn't need me to know it all. They just needed someone who would serve by them, who would encourage them, who would say, hey, maybe take a break and talk to the homeowner and listen to their story a little bit. They just needed someone who had some of the gifts I had that I wasn't seeing in myself. We all need words of encouragement. Maybe this year more than any other year. There's so much going on in this world right now, pointing us to the negative and imperfections and ways that we all may be feeling like we are failing or not getting it right now. And this year, we all find ourselves doing things in ways we never expected. I know every single pastor and elder and church leader feels very out of their depth this year, believe me. This was not what we were trained to do in seminary, was to lead people in a time of pandemic. And I know the same is for teachers and parents and for every single person. This year, we are all doing things that feel very out of our depth and wondering, is any of it good? And we miss the actual goodness and beauty and gifts that are going on. Even in this time of COVID, there's so much going on that I can lift up here in this church. From our preschool being active and the teachers and director jumping in and doing an incredible job welcoming and teaching students, even with masks on, even with social distancing, even with all the ways that they never expected. We can lift up the fact that our mission and outreach team continues every month to host a blood drive here in the church, to serve meals and say hello to friends at Burnt Ordinary, to keep doing the backpack ministry, to do things in a way that is different, but keep doing it. And some of the small groups continuing to lift each other up and meet and grow and serve and love, that there are great gifts to continue to lift up and share. But it can be so hard to see those in ourselves. So much of the time we can think, well, we're just barely keeping our head above water, that we can't even take that time to celebrate and see that there are still gifts here. In our reading for today, Paul is writing words of encouragement to a church in Philippi. It's a new church that he helped start, and he loves the people in it. But this is a hard time for himself and for the church. Paul writes this letter while in prison, most likely in Rome, and most likely not too soon before he faces his own death for his faith. He's writing this letter from whatever horrible conditions and food and water prisoners would have been given at that time, which would not have been pleasant at all. And the church in Philippi is facing its own struggles at this time. Throughout the letter, there's mentions of a force, either religious or political or spiritual. We're not quite sure, but the people in Philippi surely knew. A force that was attacking these new followers of Jesus. And of course, there are issues of government of the church, of theological debates, of finances, of safety, and of simply trying to figure out how do we live as a community of faith. In the first verses of this passage, Paul mentions that there's a divide, a disagreement, an argument going on in this church, and that it's spreading even to among the great apostles of the church, to women like Euodia and Syntyche, female preachers who are now fighting with each other. And Paul knows in these moments it'd be so easy to be discouraged, to look down and think about all the ways we're making mistakes or failing, to look only at the arguments or disagreements, or where we feel we've fallen short. But what Paul decides to do in these verses is something different. Instead, he lifts our chin and our gaze up. He invites us in that church in Philippi to look at all that is good, all that is true, all that is just, all that is excellent in and among them through the grace of God. Yes, things are not easy. Yes, there's issues and problems going on, but there still is light. There still is joy. There still is goodness. There still is so much that's worthy and wonderful about each one of you. He reminds them what a blessing they have been to him. He reminds them the ways that they are starting to spread this gospel of good news of Jesus Christ. He reminds them of God's peace and joy that will never leave them. He reminds them of love that shines in and through them. And he reminds them that they are truly loved. Again and again, Paul calls them friends and members of this new church. He calls them my beloved and my brothers and sisters. How many people do we know who might need to hear a word that they too are loved, that they too are our brothers and sisters in this difficult time? Right now, we all could use some lifting up. We all could use some words of encouragement. This has been a very hard past 6 months, and we still honestly have a ways to go. But there's still so much that's happening right now. There's still so much we can offer to one another, and encouragement we can give. And I want to say to each of you to trust me that your words have power. Your encouragement has power. Your phone calls have power. Your cards have power. Your sending of gifts have power. Your message and lifting up has power. So this week, I want to invite you to be people of encouragement. I want to invite you to think about one or two people this week who you could reach out to in some way and encourage them, to help them maybe see some gifts or goodness or light in them that they aren't seeing right now in themselves. I want you to take some moment to meditate on that person and maybe think about some gifts that they have and in what way you can lift them up. So let's take a moment right now and meditate on that question. Who is someone that you can encourage this week? And what ways can you encourage them? I'm going to invite Iris Redman to play our second song today as we take a moment to meditate on this question.